Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Outliers YouTube channel and podcast series and our program, Get to Know. I'm your host, DP Lyle, and I'm here with my partner in crime, Kathleen Antrim.
Thanks, Doug. Boy, I have to say that the interview we have for you today is somebody who I am such a huge fan of. She is an amazing writer. She's working on her 40th book. She's a New York Times bestseller. She's an international bestseller. She's an award winner. She's been nominated for a gazillion awards. Linda Castillo, welcome, welcome, welcome. Am I pronouncing your last name correctly?
Yep, that's absolutely perfect, Kathleen. Thank you. I'm taking notes while you're listing all of those accomplishments.
You
Doesn't even
should.
sound like me.
I hope you
Update
take
your
a
bio.
moment and
Yeah,
pat
yeah.
yourself on the back because wow,
Well,
I
thank you
mean,
Well,
guys for having me today. I
well, and
really
now you're
appreciate it.
nominated for the Sue Grafton Award this year, so I
yes,
think that's just phenomenal.
Yeah,
so excited.
it really is. I can remember, when you're a writer, you wrote for many years before you ever sold that first book. I remember, gosh, it was probably back in the 80s. I can remember driving to from Dallas. My husband and I were living in Dallas at the time, driving to Miami to see his parents, and we were on vacation. And we had Sue Grafton going in the car.
Hmm.
And, I had my notebook, I had my book, my terribly written book that had, I had poured so much heart into it. And I thought one of these days, little did I know that one of these days I would be a nominee for the Sue Grafton Award.
Well,
Well,
congratulations.
it's
That's just
fantastic.
yeah, truly, truly. Well, I kind of want to jump back in time a little bit. And as Doug says, I like to put our interviewees out on the couch and, get into the psychology of things.
Oh
So I'd
boy.
like to know if you feel that your childhood contributed to you becoming a writer. Were you an introverted child, an extroverted child? Did you have imaginary friends? Tell us about it.
I think everyone's childhood um, builds builds them into adulthood in some way. And my being a writer is probably the most unlikely thing in the world. I grew up in a very rural area in Ohio, Western Ohio. I think we were probably, maybe half an hour from the Indiana state line.
Where? I grew up in Ohio as well. Well, where in
Um,
Ohio?
Ithaca,
Oh
Ohio.
yeah, I know it's got. I went to
Are
Bowling
you
Green.
serious?
I
Well,
grew up in Avon Lake. Yeah,
okay, Ithaca, population 79.
yeah.
And, we lived on, gosh, I think my parents had something like 20 acres. And of course, we had pigs and chickens and horses and cows and all of that. And we didn't really do a lot in terms of, literary things. I was the only reader in the family. I did read. But I think the most important thing that I had in my childhood, aside from a pretty happy childhood, was that I had time to be bored. I think, and I mean that's kind of in a good way. I had time to um, to do creative things. And I actually did have my little sister, she's a year younger than me. We did have imaginary friends. We were huge Star Trek fans. And I can just remember standing in the field and just knowing that at any moment they were going to beam down. And but I think it really made me a more creative adult. I think having that time because I had to pretty much keep myself entertained when I was a kid. And it's not easy when you live out on the farm and you really don't do a whole lot of anything else during the summer.
I had imaginary friends as well. So tell us, do you remember their names?
Oh gosh, I think we used some names of dolls or something. I think Longlocks was the bad guy. We would use some characters from, gosh, I remember I was a big fan of the High Chaparral. I don't know if you guys remember that, the
Hmm.
little cheesy little Western that was on for a few years back in the late 60s. Bucky and Blue and all of those characters. And Manolito and just, things like that. We would take those characters and have stories with them. And of course, Star Trek was a big one.
Oh, sure.
I can
Yeah.
remember in the summertime when we weren't going to school, we would play sometimes, my little sister and I, until like, 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. And
Oh,
so,
how
yeah,
cool.
yeah, yeah.
I love it. So let's talk about, okay, so your child, I mean, honestly, it sounds like you had an idyllic childhood and you had time to imagine. So you go to high school now. Did you go to college? Did you study writing? What was your path, moving on to becoming a professional writer?
I was a very um, kind of a practical Midwesterner, and I basically wanted to make money out of high school. And of all places, I got a job at Fram Corporation. Do you know what Fram is?
I
Yep.
don't. No.
Yeah, I made oil filters, PH8As on the assembly line, third shift, and worked in the factory, gosh, maybe for a year. And I had some other jobs along the way. I was a tear sheet girl for the newspaper in Greenville, Ohio, which is kind of the big town in the western part of the state. Gosh, I did payroll, all sorts of, other things that weren't great. My first job, by the way, was detasseling corn. I did that for 2 years and working in the cornfields. But once I met my husband, I actually moved to Florida with my girlfriend Susan, and I met my husband in Florida, my husband Ernest, and had a long distance relationship for a long, long time. Finally, got married. That's how I got to Texas, and we were living in Dallas, Texas at the time, and that was, I was probably maybe 26 years old when I entered the corporate world. And I got my serious job back then was a company you're probably familiar with, Domino's Pizza. They have a
Yes.
regional office in Dallas, Texas, and I was kind of the office manager for that company, and it was a fantastic company. They were growing very fast in like the late 80s, early 90s. And I worked for that company for 12 years, did a little bit of everything, from collecting hot checks to being an office manager. And it was probably during the latter part of those 12 years that, I was reading a lot of books, reading a lot at that time. I never thought it was practical to be a writer because you basically have to be able to make a living. And so my first question that I posed to myself was, can you finish a novel? Can you write a novel? And so I had a great story, I had a lot of heart. And while I was working at Domino's Pizza, I wrote 4 novels. And of course, they were all rejected promptly. And after that fourth novel, it was right around 1999, I sold my first book to Harlequin. And it was a romantic suspense novel. And at that point, I quit the corporate world and I became a writer.
That
It was
is
Good
such
for
a
great.
cool
you.
story. Wow.
Yeah.
And it's so important for writers to hear, it doesn't just happen with the first draft of your first book.
Oh, it really doesn't. It took me a
Yeah.
long, long time. And it was, at the time, they always say it's the journey. It never feels like it's the journey when you're on that journey. You're like, oh,
Right.
I'm rejected again. This is so depressing. And I think I must have sent every manuscript to every publisher and agent in New York City probably twice.
I love it.
And met so that's when I really started meeting other writers. I was a member back then of the Romance Writers of America because I started my career writing romantic suspense. And it was just an absolutely fantastic time. I loved it.
So
Wow.
you moved on, uh, and obviously you're best known for your Amish series, the Kate Burkholder. I've
Yes.
read all of them, as you well know, and I
Thank
love
you.
Kate. She's truly one of the great characters ever. What prompted you to move into that world and create
Well,
that character?
that's a really good, really important question. And it was something that I had been working toward for a long time. There was sort of a defining moment though. I was in a little bit of an unusual position at that point in my career. I was writing for Harlequin, writing romantic suspense, and they usually want a book from an author, novel. They're a little bit shorter, every 3 to 4 months in order to be successful. And then I wrote a full-length romantic suspense for Berkeley and I sold it. And it was so crazy because at that point I was writing for two publishing houses and I was just going nuts. I was just working a lot. I basically did nothing but work 7 days a week. And I had two editors, I had Cindy and Kim. And I just happened to get revision letters back from them at about the same time on two different novels. And to sort of sum it up, basically what they were telling me was, Linda, these are romance novels. You need to concentrate on the relationship between the hero and the heroine. They were basically telling me to stop killing people. And so at that point, I realized, Linda, you're right. My strength was mystery and suspense, and I loved that. And I was basically putting too much of that into the relationship books. And so at that point, I stopped writing for Harlequin, and I wrote Sworn to Silence, the first book in the Kate Burkholder series. And it's history after that.
Well, what drew you to that community though? I mean, because it's unusual.
It
I
is
mean, with
unusual, and that was one of the things that drew me to that community. I mean, I'm from Ohio, Western
right.
Ohio. Most of the Amish are actually from Northeast Ohio, but I rode the bus with a girl in high school. She probably was not Amish, but she may have been Mennonite or Beachy Amish or something like that. So I knew of them, and one of the things that intrigues me the most about the Amish is, I'm intrigued by secret societies, and they're really not a secret society, but they're very much a closed society. And I thought, what a great setting for a person or a community that has a secret or needs to keep a secret. And that was really the thing that kind of set me on fire.
Hmm.
So cool. I mean, just amazing. And I know as I was growing up, that would be a big, trip in the summertime. We'd go to see the Amish, which
Yeah.
I'm sure that they didn't appreciate that we would go there just to, but it was, like you said, just a really different culture. So, so you get this idea. So how did you submerge yourself into that culture?
Of course you can find a lot of stuff on the internet. I mean, you can find all sorts of information on the internet. I'm very good. Most writers, most everybody's good at researching. But, it's such a complicated culture. I mean, I'll admit right now that there's a few things that I got wrong in the first few books. It wasn't really until I started going on book tour with the second book that I started meeting people from that part of Ohio. One of the people that I met is Denise, and she's a librarian in Dover, Ohio. And she's just like a social butterfly. She knows everybody, including the Amish. And so at that point, I was introduced to, yeah, I got to spend some time with an Amish family. They have a dairy farm, kind of in the Walnut Creek, Sugar Creek area, in Holmes County. And then I also got to have lunch with an Amish man, with Denise when I was on tour. And this was actually right before I wrote The Hidden One, which is set in the Kish Valley in Pennsylvania, which I love. That's one of my favorite books. That lunch with him and Denise is um, one of the things that got me started writing that book. He had told me that he and his wife went to a wedding in the Kish Valley. And he was so funny because he said, the Amish are really weird there. And just very different. I mean, if you look at the buggies, for example, in Pennsylvania, they're black. If you look at the buggies in Holmes County, Ohio, they're gray. And if you go to Kish Valley, you're going to see bright yellow buggies, which is just crazy. And he was just telling me, a lot of cultural differences. I mean, they deck out the buggies with like, walnut dashes, cigarette lighters, things like that that you don't see in other places. But I was so intrigued, and the Kish Valley is so beautiful, and there are so many different types of Amish in Kish Valley. That was one of the reasons, well, the reason why I set the hidden one there in Kish Valley.
Wow. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
it
Well, let's
is.
talk about Rage. I mean, this is obviously the one nominated for the Grafton Award,
Yeah.
and it is I guess the word's disturbing.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting story. So why
Yeah.
don't you tell us where this came from and how you developed this little tale?
Well, this is one of those books where it's hard to, I've got it right here. This is
Ooh, I
actually
love that
one of
cover.
one of my favorites. It's a beautiful cover.
Yep.
I love the
Yep.
cover. But this is one of those books, it's difficult to talk about without giving too much away.
Right.
Sure.
And I think one of the things that really intrigued me about the whole concept of this book was that big divide. There is a divide between the Amish community and the rest of us, the non-Amish or the English, as they like to say. And, Amish teenagers are human beings, and all of us, whether we're a teenager or adult, we're human. We make mistakes. We do things we're not supposed to do. And I wanted to sort of examine that. And, when you think about some of the topics that come up in this book, there are some sort of black market things that are happening to young people when they're on Rumspringa. And Rumspringa, just, quickly, it's the time in a young Amish person's life, um, maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 years before they become baptized. The whole Anabaptist thing, the Amish, the Hutterites, and the Mennonites, the thing that separates that religion from, the Protestant or Catholic or other religions is that they believe in adult baptism. And so those years before those young people become baptized, they give them Rumspringa, which is basically German for running around. They want them to have a taste of the real world without the rules so they can decide and make an honest decision whether or not they want to become baptized. And so, you have Amish young people, they're not yet baptized, they have all of this freedom. And I think some of those young people are not prepared for that much freedom, especially when there are, perhaps predators that look for that kind of naivety for, exploitation. So that was kind of the whole thing that that I started with this book, and it turned out I really do love the story, and it was disturbing. There were some
Yep.
areas in the story that really was disturbing, but I think it's also one of those, in a way, it's kind of a rip from the headlines kind of thing.
Yep.
Just
Well,
love it. I
back to this
look
cover.
at
I
this
mean, I got
cover.
the division. I love the little path going through the cornfields and whatnot.
Spectacular.
It's fantastic. But you know what really struck me is that long crow up between your name and the title.
Yeah,
And that was, I grew up with crows. I grew up in the South. I know crows. But I had two
yeah,
pet crows as a kid. I know all about crows. They're very, very smart, but they're
yeah.
also ominous signs.
They are. I think there are
Yeah.
some
Quote the
old,
raven. Yeah.
yeah, and I mean there are some old sayings out there that says if you see crows, it means there's death coming, or
Right.
Hmm.
and don't they call a group of crows, are they called a
They're
murder?
called a
They
murder of
are
crows.
a
Yes.
murder of
Yes.
crows. I know.
But
Okay.
that crow right there in the middle of the thing, it was like as
Yeah.
soon as I saw it, I said something bad is going on
Yeah.
in that field.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's getting the hell out of there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Linda, tell us, tell our viewers where they can learn more about you, where they can buy your books, all that good stuff.
I do keep my website updated, and I do have a printable list of books. Rage is actually the 17th book in the series. I can't believe there's so many books in this series. And I go out to Goodreads and Amazon. I'm one of those writers. I do look at reviews, it doesn't bother me. I just, I'm interested, so I look. A lot of purists out there say that if you're going to start the series, start in the beginning. And that's true. And, if you're a purist, but I also just want to say that each one of these novels is also a standalone mystery. And one of the things that, and Doug, I'm sure you know this
Hmm.
too, having written multiple series, is that you want to ground the reader to a degree so that the characters are not strangers. You have an idea of the background and a little bit of backstory. So they are standalones. If you want to know everything, depth of relationships and things like that, start at the beginning. The first book, by the way, is titled Sworn to Silence. And very interestingly, there was a Lifetime original movie
Hmm.
made of
With
Sworn to
Neve Campbell, one
Silence.
of my favorite actresses. Yes.
Yeah.
She was really fantastic, and they retitled it An Amish Murder. And a lot of
Hmm.
people don't know this, but when Neve was shooting the movie, she was 4 months pregnant. And I talked to Barbara Lieberman, who was one of the producers, and she said that, it was an ongoing joke around set. What are we going to have Nev carry today? And if you watch the movie, you will see that she's either carrying a file, or she's got her coat on, or she's got the scarf coming down. But they did a pretty good job. One of the things that I loved about that movie is I really think they captured small town USA. They did a
I
really
agree.
good job with that.
Yeah, it
So
was a good movie. It was very
yeah,
well done.
it
Yeah.
was
Yes.
And I
pretty
thought
well.
Neve Campbell was perfect to play Kate.
She really was. I
I
couldn't have
mean,
asked for a better Kate. She was
yeah, my
fantastic.
image
Yeah.
of her was very similar to that actually.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, me too.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So good. And wow, outstanding. I love it. I love it.
So, yeah, so lindacastillo.com, correct?
Yes,
For all your books.
lindacastillo.com. Right.
And you are a fantastic interview. We have to
Yes.
have you back. You've got to keep us posted on your next books as because I'm sure you're probably already started on the next
Oh
one or
yeah.
two.
I write downstairs. I just hit page 220, 228 on the 18th book in the series. So, and I do
Very
have a
cool.
short story collection coming out this summer.
Oh, cool.
There's six Kate Burkholder short stories. It's called A Dark Path, and it's out
Mm,
on July 14th.
very
Very
cool.
cool.
Well, then we need to
Yeah.
have you back on to talk about that as well.
I would love
So,
that. You
Yeah.
guys are fun.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Linda, thank
You're
you so
fine.
much for
Thank you.
being with us. And Doug, I'll throw it back to you.
Linda, thanks so much. So
Thank
much.
you.
Love your books. Love talking with you. Everything's just been a hoot and a half, as they say.
All right.
So,
I like that.
and all right, well, that wraps up this episode of Get to Know here on the Outliers YouTube channel and podcast series. And as you know, we will be back with other interviews and other fun stuff. So until then, keep reading, keep writing, keep having fun, and try not to get caught.